Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. It's your old pal Jake, and we got a 2 for Tuesday. I absolutely love it. Today, we have our normal show, and then we're covering the State of the Union at 9 p.m. I hope you will tune in to watch us mildly heckle Joe Biden, and then also, talk about what you can do regarding what he's talking about. All in all, he has thus far had a productive presidency, I have to say, given the circumstances he was governing under. But before that, we have a whole show for you at a time. Rachel Maddow discussed the base of the GOP, what they're up to. Specifically, the base, as in the terrorist organization named that. They were attacking U.S. infrastructure. We need to deal with this. It is a serious issue. Then, Texas Paul talks about what 25 years of GOP governance looks like in terms of the effect. I'll give you a hint. People are literally crawling through dumpsters for food. That's what 25 years of GOP rule looks like in Texas. And then Mike Pence talking about cutting Social Security. Folks, it ain't a joke. We thought it was all sound and noise in the mass media world about getting rid of abortion. Then they did it. They eliminated those rights for every American. They put us back decades of progress. They're gunning to do the same thing for Social Security. They are trying to do the same thing for Social Security. Don't sleep on it. And most importantly, pay attention to what you can do and do it. Let's dive into it, folks. I'm excited. Rachel Maddow recently discussed attacks on U.S. infrastructure. A group of, or rather, neo-Nazis across the country have been trying to do this. Far-right groups, in fact, across the country. The militant militias, the white nationalists, the Christian nationalists, all the worst scum of America seem to have arrived on a plan for literally attacking the U.S. that involves starting with things that can't shoot back. Power stations. Here she is talking about it.
In 2017, May 2017, an 18-year-old neo-Nazi in Tampa, Florida, shot and killed 2 of his 3 roommates. When the police searched the apartment after that double homicide, they ended up also arresting, in addition to the shooter, they ended up arresting a 3rd roommate, one who was not shot. Turns out that 3rd roommate had been stockpiling a huge amount of homemade explosives in their shared garage. In a separate incident, a little more than a year earlier, March 2016, a 28-year-old woman was arrested for robbing 4 different convenience stores in Maryland while armed with a machete. Well, now get this. It all comes together. Turns out the machete wielder and the explosives hoarder then began a relationship.
Well, I mean, I can't fault him that. Also, look, I have no compliments for these people except the lady who robbed a convenience store with a machete, just for having the chutzpah to rob a convenience store with a machete. I mean, it ain't moral, but it's brave. I'll give her that.
While they were each serving time in separate prisons. Aw. Now, today, those 2 individuals were arrested again. Federal prosecutors allege that the 2 plotted to attack 5 electrical power substations around Baltimore, Maryland. Their plan was allegedly to knock out a ring of 5 specific electrical substations all in one day because they thought that would cause a cascading effect to, quote, completely destroy the whole city, meaning presumably they expected to knock Baltimore into a pre-electric light state of being.
Now, if you're a regular watcher of this show, pay attention to what she says next in particular, because you're going to hear language we've used before when we talked about a report on domestic terrorism in the U.S., warning about this specific thing.
And one that couldn't easily be repaired. Now, if that whole plan, if that whole idea to shoot up electrical substations to knock out the power semi-permanently and cause major chaos, if that plan is giving you deja vu, you are not mistaken. There have been at least 9 attacks on electric power substations, at least 9 attacks across 3 different states.
WRAL News. That is one of the very sources we use to talk about this.
Just in the past 3 months. Early last year, Homeland Security issued a bulletin warning that domestic violent extremists have, quote, developed credible specific plans to attack electricity infrastructure.
DVEs, domestic violent extremists. That was in our list of terms discussing the different brands of right-wing terrorists. They ain't playing around, folks.
Since at least 2020. Now, in most of these attacks, suspects haven't been identified, and that means motives can't be identified either. But last month, NPR affiliates in Oregon and Washington obtained an FBI memo showing that neo-Nazi groups were calling for attacks just like this. The neo-Nazis that the FBI was tracking, quote, believe that an attack on electrical infrastructure will contribute to their ideological goal of causing societal collapse and a subsequent race war in the United States.
All right, so to paint a little clarity on what she's talking about, this has been a goal of far-right extremists for quite a while. When you hear about the storm, it has morphed over time, this QAnon business, but that is more or less what they are talking about. And in fact, the concept has existed since before QAnon. The idea being to start a conflict in the U.S. that forces the government to take a side, and that side being white people. That's how they view it. I think they would find that it would go quite differently from what they're thinking. But that is the idea. They want people, they literally want Americans fighting each other in the streets to the degree that it requires government intervention, and their hope, in fact, just like the plan was apparently in Brazil, their hope is that then the government will come down on the side of the fascists. That is the base the GOP plays to. When you hear me say that I do not want us compromising with Republicans, that's why. Because the core of who they need to please, that consists of either billionaires or terrorists. I mean, that's it at this point. The people who are voting Republican currently and don't hold terrorist ideas, they also don't really understand what they're voting for. And time again, we find this to be true. In fact, if you look at the average Fox News viewer, they have less knowledge of how the government works and what has been happening in it than somebody who does not watch any news at all. That's how much misinforming Fox does. It is less. Their audience is less prepared to deal with the issues of the world than someone who doesn't pay any attention to them at all. That bad, folks. But this is Rachel Maddow. You know I got to let her keep going. She is among the best.
And that's part of what makes these arrests about this planned Baltimore attack today significant. Because the former explosives hoarder arrested today, he's the founder of a neo-Nazi group called the Atomwaffen. And the former machete-wielding robber, who was also arrested today, she wrote what the FBI believed to be an ideological manifesto of sorts, which both references hitting electrical substations to knock out power, and also her admiration for the Unabomber and for Hitler.
Wow.
Joining us now is Kathleen Belew. She teaches history at Northwestern University. She's the author of Bring the War Home, The White Power Movement and Paramilitary America, which is really the seminal text in this field. Professor Belew, I really appreciate.
I think I wrote about this gal before. Fun fact, in my previous life as a local news journalist, I did write about the base specifically. In Michigan, a fellow was arrested, a young man, unfortunately, was arrested for starting a training camp. Yeah, full-on terrorist training camp for the base. And I wrote about that. I think she might have been part of that article. Oh, well, no reminiscing. Let's listen.
You being here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I said at the top of the show tonight that this appears to be emerging as a favored tactic of the white power movement and the sort of neo-Nazi affiliated white supremacist movement in the United States. Is that a fair generalization?
Yes, although the electrical part may be new, but infrastructure attacks by this movement are not new. This is a strategy that was pioneered by a group called The Order in 1983, moving forward. And that group is sort of the base of the tactical base for Atomwaffen Division, which translates to the base. So infrastructure attacks are one kind of violence among several others that are all laid out in a strategy in common in order to bring about what the movement seeks, which is the overthrow of the United States, the creation of a white ethno-state, mass violence against communities of color, and even genocide against non-white peoples. So infrastructure attacks sit next to show of force violence like the January 6th attack on the Capitol and mass casualty violence like the Oklahoma City bombing. All of these exist together within one broad ideology in the white power movement.
I've heard this described as accelerationist tactics, and I know that's an awkward word, but I wonder if you can sort of explain the thinking there, because I feel like there's a little bit of a leap of logic to it, which makes it not translate to non-expert sort of just news consumers about this. I mean, the idea is that you'd attack infrastructure, you'd cause people material pain, you'd cause chaos and upset, and then somehow there's a slippery slope that results in race war and white people taking over and genocide against non-white people. Like, why do they believe that infrastructure attacks and resulting chaos ultimately accelerate us to some race war future where they think they're going to win?
So infrastructure attacks and mass casualty violence and show of power attacks are all meant to do the same thing in the ideology of this movement, which is laid out in books like the Turner Diaries and in movement ideological writings of other kinds. They are all supposed to awaken other people to what these activists see as the staggering state of emergency problems that face white people. The woman arrested today in that piece of writing apparently said to an informant that she would do anything for my people. This is the idea of white people as her race and as her nation. It reflects a sense that white people are being extinguished and will be apocalyptically vanished if action is not taken.
Okay. So when you have decades and decades and decades of Republican rhetoric that blames everything that has gone wrong with the country on minorities, either through dog whistling or just outright saying it, what you get is what you are seeing right there. You get extremists who say, I'm going to pick up a gun and do something about it. You have a political party which is simultaneously scapegoating minorities and making sure the populace is heavily armed. They are brewing domestic terrorists. They are the reason we have them. Republicans are the reason this is a major problem. She said that electrical attacks are a somewhat new thing. They're really not. They've been happening. There have been consistent electrical substation attacks since at least 2010. I believe they predate that significantly. I'll have to look at the details. But then she did say infrastructure attacks in general are a way this has been attempted. It is. The difference being, believe it or not, our domestic violent extremists, our domestic terrorists, are taking lessons from Al-Qaeda, from the Taliban, from ISIS. They saw how those groups performed and what they did in the Middle East and have taken notes. So since 2010, yeah, they have focused more, not entirely, but more on electrical infrastructure attacks. But again, the goal is the same. They, in their crazy ass world, they think everybody is going to feel the way they feel, is going to fall for the same con that they have fallen for, and is going to blame minorities, and is going to try to get them. And we learned 77 million Americans will at the very least allow that to happen. They will support anything as long as you make sure that it's got a nice, greedy coat of paint on it that says, no, we, the GOP, are good with money. Let me tell you, let's look at what is actually causing the problems that America faces. Let's look at what a state looks like when it is run by the GOP for 25 years. Texas Paul recently shared a video of people living in conditions created by consistent GOP governance. Texas Paul works with the Midas Touch Network. I like his videos. I haven't featured him a lot. We just haven't had a lot of overlap. In this case, we certainly do. Here it is.
Folks, we just had a little bit of winter weather here, and people are dumpster diving for food because Greg Abbott's a failure of a governor. Take a look at this video. Yeah, folks, those are my fellow Texans in Austin, outside Austin there. Austin's one of the wealthiest cities in the state. And they're dumpster diving for meat. If you don't know what's going on here, we had a mild winter storm. I mean, it was a little bit of freezing weather and a little bit of rain. That was it. It was nothing spectacular. I mean, it's kind of weather that people that live up in Buffalo or Green Bay or anywhere in Minnesota, anywhere up north, they would have gone to a football game, man. But it shuts my state down because we've got a ridiculously lousy governor.
And specifically, what specifically has happened? Well, less funding has gone to the roads. Less funding have gone to businesses. Less funding in general have gone to infrastructure. Why? Because big businesses, not normal businesses, but major, huge, multi-billion-dollar businesses, they get tax breaks. The system of taxing in Texas simply does not allow it to pay for basic necessities. It is designed more and more, the longer Republicans stay in power, more and more of it is designed to be privatized. Consistently, we see that privatized aspects of life versus government-run aspects of life. I'm talking, you can compare anything. Healthcare, the building of infrastructure, whatever. It does poorly in comparison. Privatized versions of these things do worse than public versions. Why? Because the public versions are judged on whether or not the people are satisfied with the product. The private versions are judged on whether or not somebody gets rich. It doesn't help the public for one person to get rich. It just doesn't. For everybody to get a little bit more money, that helps the public tremendously. For everybody to get even a couple of $100 extra a month, that helps tremendously because that money keeps circulating through the economy. But when all those couple of $100 a month in a town instead go to one person who gets a couple extra million a year, doesn't help the town. That guy buys one yacht from a different town, and it's parked somewhere that ain't landlocked. And that money is gone forever from that community. That yacht money does not come back. That's what's happening in Texas. That's why you have people rifling through a dumpster for food in Texas. Let's let him keep going. This man's on a roll.
And it happens every year. And we know it's going to happen every year. And we have several people died. And we've got my fellow Texans diving in dumpsters for food because it shut everything down. We lost power again, of course. Austin was 400,000 people were without power for so long that the grocery stores had to start throwing their meat out as spoilage. It was spoiling. And that's what these people are doing, is because they've been unable to go shopping. They've been able, to buy things. Everything's closed down, and it was closed down for so long that they have made their way to the local grocery store and are dumpster diving in the dumpsters to pick through the meat to find the unspoiled meat to take home to their families. Yeah, that's my state. That's really my state. And,
all right, so tell us why.
And that's a conversation we need to have. If you love your spouse or you love anything, you have to love them for what they are. A lot of people create this fiction of what they are. And my state does that in spades. It really does. And I'm going to tell you the truth. Texas is a poor state. We are. We're one step above Mississippi and Louisiana. We are a poor state. What hides it is that we have citizens in our state and little pockets that are, I'm going to tell you, there are pockets in my state that are so freaking wealthy, you would think you were on Rodeo Drive. Don't get me wrong. Dallas and Houston have sections that are just crazy wealthy. Austin has sections up on the river and Lake Travis that are crazy wealthy. Crazy wealthy. I mean, you see the Ferraris, you see the Lamborghinis, but that's not the state, folks. The state is freaking huge. And I'll just give you one example. You have Elon Musk that's moved to my state. Technically, he lives in Texas. He does not live in Texas. And my state runs off a sales tax. He only spends so much money here, and he only lives here. He's got a little bitty shack castle that he calls home. It's not real. We are not taking tax revenue off of Elon Musk.
Let's pause that for a second. He's quite right. Let's look at the actual numbers of what he's talking about. I put a link in the description that I think will illustrate this nicely. This is the GDP per capita. Let's get a little bigger there. GDP per person. Because he's talking about Elon Musk throwing off the measurements there. So when people look at that area, they can say, well, on average, people are doing fine. Yeah, because one of them is like the third richest guy in the world, and the rest are dirt poor. Here it is per person, the GDP. In red, you have states that are Republican-run. In blue, Democrat-run. Well, would you look at that? In the yellow, by the way, that's the average. That includes bear in mind, our 1% richest, which hold the majority of the wealth for the country. But nonetheless, look at the states doing great. On the left, you have the top performing states, mostly blue. On the right, you have the bottom performing states, mostly red. Absolutely brutal. You want to just glance and look at the difference between governance in a red state versus a blue state. There it is. GDP per capita, the amount of money each individual person makes on average. There it is. Let's let Texas Paul finish this up because the man is on a roll.
We're taking tax revenue off the lower middle income people that work in his factory. Not Elon Musk.
True.
It's the people that live there that are paying the taxes.
Now, bear in mind, what has the what has the GOP, the Republicans, pitched recently? Doing away entirely with income tax, and instead raising our sales tax, as in the tax you pay every time you buy something, to 30%. 30% they want to raise that to. In other words, doing this, what he's talking about, but on a cartoonish scale. Absolutely off the charts, making sure billionaires don't have to pay for anything. No schools, no roads, no services you need. And when you go to work, they still get to take the majority of the profit of that. That's why they're billionaires, is they get to take more of the labor than you do. That's why. Don't let the GOP get away with this.
And folks, they're not rich.
Unless you want to be like
They
Texas.
aren't. In fact, Elon Musk is so wealthy, he skews the numbers. If you go down to South Texas, where we're the poorest of the poor, I mean, you got places like Colinas that they don't have water. Folks, they don't have running water.
Arizona as well.
You know, he skews the numbers for at least a dozen counties and makes them look rich when you figure it all in together. And it's not true. It's not reality. And I know there's a lot of Texans that are very proud, because we really are proud people. We are. It's just ingrained in our DNA. When you look at our DNA strand, there's a thing there for pride, and it makes the double helix bend. It's so swollen, you know? I mean, it's the way we are. The Texans don't like to say stuff like this about our state. But we're dirt fucking poor. And it's because of people like Greg Abbott who don't live in reality. You know, he's out there thumping his chest, expecting a medal, saying things like, well, the amount of electricity we have available, you know, it's irrelevant. Your responsibility to your citizens doesn't end at the high transmission lines.
What did he just say? So Greg Abbott says, and the reason I've included this Texas Paul clip, by the way, I really want to say, if you just enjoy good content, I definitely recommend subscribing to WYCD Wicked, but also Texas Paul. I find everything he has done has been really compelling. Again, it's not something I've featured much on this show because we haven't had a lot of overlap, but I watch him for fun because he's very interesting. But what did he just bring up there? Another trick. We talked a little bit a couple shows back about the language these politicians use when they are lying to you. That is one such trick. He says the amount of electricity available to Texans, the amount they're producing, is X, and he wants an award for it. And Texas Paul points out that's not the amount that's going to Texans, that's just the amount they're making. That's just the amount they're able to make. Imagine, if you will, that you have a bakery that's making 10,000 loaves a day, and of bread a day, and you only have the ability to ship out or to sell for one reason or another 100 loaves. Doesn't matter that you can make 10,000. You got to judge it based on the 100 loaves you sell. Is that a sustainable business? Similarly, Greg Abbott is saying, oh, we produce X amount of energy, and yet there's these outages constantly, and yet there are Texans constantly suffering. Look at that on the national scale. What do they say about health care for all, ensuring that all Americans have health care? We want to improve accessibility to health care. We want to make health care accessible for all Americans. It sounds like a good thing. What they mean is you can buy it. Sure, I have access to a Ferrari dealership. It doesn't mean I can buy a Ferrari. That's what they're talking about. That's the language they use. That's how dishonest they are. They wouldn't be using that language if they were honestly approaching these problems. The GOP is not an actual political party with real goals and a plan to help America. They just aren't. They are a gigantic con. They exist only to enrich themselves by enriching their donors. They're salesmen for billionaires. That is all the GOP is. They lobby for billionaires. They're henchmen. They hench. That's the GOP. Let me jump back for a moment. What can you do about terrorists in America? There's a link in the description. It's the FBI tip line. Quite simply, if you happen to see, and I should have said this with the earlier section, we'll do some creative editing and put this where it ought to be. But if you happen to spot somebody that you believe, you have reason to believe is a domestic terrorist, which, folks, more and more likely every day that you live not far from one. I'll tell you, I live not far from a camp, at least a place that was at one point a training camp for domestic terrorists. If you see something, say something. Use the tip line provided in the description. Okay. What can you do about 25 years of governance in Texas? Well, the good news is we measure things in the United States. Whenever you measure how Republicans are doing, it becomes obvious that they're doing poorly. You'll note every time somebody says we shouldn't measure this or that, for example, police shootings, for example, gun violence in general in the U.S., global warming. Anytime somebody says we shouldn't measure something, it's the GOP. Well, despite their best efforts, we do measure a whole lot of things in America. In the article linked in the description, I have to say I was hugely impressed. It aggregated data from a bunch of places. They also show their methodology and explain it very well. Show that article to your GOP friends. Put it on social media. You don't even have to say, ha, look at this, I win. Just put that article in your social media somewhere. Give the GOP voters that you may know, that might be in your life, that might be glancing at your social media from time to time, give them the opportunity to see the results of their votes. Because in red states, you have a consistently worse quality of life. I only showed you the GDP per capita. It's so much more. Crime, infrastructure, healthcare, all of it. By and large, worse in red states. You have a way worse quality of life if you have been governed by Republicans. Why? Because they haven't been caring about the people they govern. They have been taking your money, giving it to billionaires. That is what they do. Plain and simple. Show that. Show that. That is what you can do. Got a comment here. GR619 says, GRR619 says, Republicans are missing such an easy goal. Yeah, genuinely. Andrew Woznicki says they miss it on purpose for money. And there it is. You just, I don't even have to do my part here. That is exactly correct, Andrew. They are missing it intentionally for money. That's their con. That is what they do. So what's the future look like? Where are they going with this? What's the next big con for Republicans? Well, you want to know what the standard Republican playbook looks like, what the Mitch McConnells of the world are going to be pursuing instead of just the MAGA crazies. Listen to what Mike Pence wants to do. We've got a clip here from the Young Turks. Hey, you know I love me some TYT, babe. Ana Kasparian's recent debate with Ben Shapiro. Wonderful. Cenk Uygur, anytime he goes off, makes me a happy man. Love TYT. Here's a great example of why. This is them heckling the Jim Christ out of Mike Pence, and rightly so.
I was a part of it when George W. Bush proposed Social Security reform in 2005. The time has come for us to have the kind of leadership that says to everyone that's got hair the same color as me, nothing's going to change for you.
Already, your old pal Jake's got to jump in. Listen to their rhetorical tricks there. We talk about dog whistling a lot. That right there, that was a dog whistle. He wants the people that aren't really paying attention to be like, okay, it's a later thing. But he wants the people that are his voters, and he knows it, that are going to be concerned, I might personally suffer. He wants them to know, you'll be fine. This is your grandkids we're screwing over. This is your kids we're screwing over. But you'll be fine. In other words, he's going, listen, I know you've been selfish and you've been on this train because we're going to attack other people. And now it sounds like we're going to attack you. But don't worry, we're still going to be attacking other people. We're just expanding that group of who other people are to people who aren't able to collect this right now. That's what you translate that to. People that have hair like mine, white hair. He's saying, hey, folks my age, you'll be okay. Still vote for us. You're still only screwing over other people. Scumbag.
Yeah, but what about people with beautifully chemically altered hair like mine? What happens to me considering I pay into Social Security and should be entitled to those benefits later? He doesn't address that, shockingly. But let's hear more from Mike Pence, who wants to privatize Social Security.
To give younger Americans better choices that would also be better for the country, I think is an idea whose time has come. There's a way back. There are modest reforms in entitlements that can be done without disadvantaging anybody at the point of the need.
Doubt it.
And actually, I think the day could come when we can replace the New Deal with a better deal.
Hold on, Anna, if you don't mind me jumping in for a moment. Let me hear that one more time. Give me that good evil.
There's a way back. There are modest reforms.
Way back from what? Reforming what?
In entitlements that.
Remember we talked about this, the language they use. What are entitlements? That is a word they have chosen that makes it politically acceptable. It sounds acceptable. It sounds like they're talking about going after, these darn kids, these entitled people. It sounds almost like they're going after rich people, doesn't it? These entitled people. They're going after Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. That's what they mean by entitlements. The things you are entitled to as an American citizen. That's what they mean. They're going after anything that allows some Americans to take care of other Americans. In other words, anything that resembles socialism in any way, such as Social Security, they will go after. If they say, let's leave him on that dumb-looking face because that's what I think of the guy. Let me just paint a picture for you. If they got all of these wins for the GOP and they got rid of anything helpful to Americans that they're talking about getting rid of now, the next thing they'd go after, they would try to find a way to privatize police, fire departments, the military. In fact, they are already privatizing the military. Betsy DeVos's scumbag brother Eric Prince owns Blackwater. Remember how many people I cite died as a result of George W. Bush's lie in the Middle East? 7,000 American soldiers plus 8,000 contractors during that war when it looked real bad, when we kept bringing back reports of how many Americans were killed. When we wanted to wash those numbers, we started relying on contractors a lot. Contractors just means privatized militaries. Death squads. 8,000 of those died. How many of those were Americans? They're pretty tight with their numbers. We aren't sure. Probably most. But we still have to say 7,000 American soldiers died because of the privatization of the military. They will try to do this with everything. They would like rich people to be the new lords of the land and us us to bow to them. They want us to be peasants in medieval times. Bear in mind, if we all got transported back to medieval times, we're suddenly in a medieval society. You and me, we're not the knights in shining armor. We will find there are no knights in shining armor. There are just, at best, well-paid henchmen who get to boss us around and be cruel and prima noctis and yada, yada, yada. That's what they are trying to convert America into. That's their plan. All right, I'm going to quit interrupting her. Anna goes off. You know I love when she gets angry.
The better deal is privatizing Social Security and having your retirement savings 100% tied to risk, meaning the stock market, because Social Security is really the only retirement program that guarantees income for people who have retired. And of course, big businesses, the wealthy, want to gut it. They want to privatize it because they don't want to pay taxes in order to keep it funded and well functioning. Now, go ahead, Cenk. This is what the Republican Party is. I just hope you guys understand that as they lie to you in your face and pretend like they're not looking to cut Social Security or privatize Social Security. They absolutely have been looking at doing so. They will continue persistently fighting to do so. This is who they are. Go ahead, Cenk.
You know I love Cenk Uygur. I will listen to him. I have listened to him in marathon sessions, but I must jump in. So, what she just said, that Social Security is a guaranteed income for some Americans. If you want to look at getting a universal guaranteed income, in other words, a universal basic income, a UBI, we discussed a little bit about how you can do that. You can start a pilot program in your town by talking to your mayor or your city council. There are city council meetings in towns all over. It is a requirement that the public be allowed to attend in some manner. Go to these. If you have a big enough town, start a pilot program. But there's another way we can approach this problem. We can approach a solution to the problem of not having a UBI. We can expand Social Security instead of doing what Republicans have been doing and say, let's go older and older and older with it. Let's keep pushing that age up. Go the other way. As productivity goes up in America, we should be pushing the age where you are eligible for Social Security down. We should be saying, instead of having it start when it starts, let's put it at age 50. And pay for it by raising taxes appropriately on the people who have gotten the majority of the benefit of the production. As we have seen many times now, productivity in America has gone up. In fact, have a look at U.S. income by class. Who's been getting that productivity? Oh, well, now, would you look at that? Why those in the upper income now get more benefit from that than the rest of us. So let's lower the age of Social Security and pay for it by taxing the rich. Just a thought. But if you're only going to take away one thing from this, remember she said the age of guaranteed income. Remember that phrase, guaranteed income. That is what the old folks are fighting so hard to protect. That is what people who are normally Republican voters really want to protect. That's what the rest of us want to protect as well, because it's a decent thing. You shouldn't have to work yourself straight into the grave. You should enjoy life in the United States. My God. So, guaranteed income is the phrase to remember. Guaranteed income. That is what we are searching for Americans. Cenk, hit us with the good Young Turk energy.
Yeah. The other thing that you get if you privatize Social Security is giant Wall Street fees. Trillions of dollars in fees that will go to the bankers in this country who donate generously to Mike Pence and other politicians. So
we were talking about why privatizing doesn't work as well. There it is. Cenk, thank you for saying it quicker than Jake. So just think of it structurally. It very basically, if you have a government-run program, who is necessary there? You and the government. Rather, the taxpayer and the government. That's it. Yes, there are various staff along there, but if you privatize things like this, now who's necessary? You don't get rid of the government. Government still has to regulate it in some capacity, but you also have a bunch of other people. Now there's you, the government. Now there's the stockbrokers, and every time you add a group, remember, you got to pay for their car, their house, their kids' college, all of that. Now there's the stockbrokers. Now there's the people speculating off that stock as well. Now you have the insurance people, everybody who has to insure that, the investment in some capacity. You're also paying for all of that. This process has to make so much money, has to take in so much money that it pays for the lives of the people whose industry involves that piece of awful legislation. Privatizing is bad, generally speaking, for services that the public is reliant upon. Privatizing is fine for luxury goods. Privatizing is fine for all sorts of things. It's not fine for things like this, where the public needs something. That should not be private.
That's not a little thing. That's the mother lode. They've been looking to privatize it so they can get those fees for decades now. And so that's why George W. Bush tried it, and now here they come again. Now, guys, when you hear words like better choices, slight reform, make Social Security stronger, a better deal, those are all code words for we're going to cut it, we're going to slash it, okay? So remember we've talked about this before, whatever you would have gotten if you got to retire at 65, or these days for most of you 67, right? And you're going to get Social Security that year, whatever the number is for you, you will not get it if the retirement age is 68. If it's 70, you won't get 3 years worth of payments that you put into. And of course, they're hoping that a lot of you don't get it, that you pass away before then. And that way, hey, we never had to pay you guys, even though you paid into it your whole lives, okay?
Absolutely disgraceful. So that is the goal of Republicans. We saw what the base they appeal to is. The base they appeal to are irrational. And they are, frankly, people more likely to become terrorists than anyone else in the United States. They are not people worth compromising with, because you'll have to dilute reality with whatever fiction they live alongside. We saw what a state looks like when it's run by the GOP. In other words, we saw an experiment in long-term GOP rule. The more we allow the GOP to be involved with America, the worse America does. It's that simple. Now we see nationally what they are looking to do. What are they looking to do? To cut the most popular program the United States has ever made. Let me repeat that. They are looking to cut the most popular program that has ever existed in the United States of America. They want to get rid of that. And I think you'll find, if you look around the world, conservative is just a code word for rich guy's henchman. That's all. When you get rich, funny what happens, you'll bribe anybody. A lot of what you seem to care about suddenly comes down to who's going to regulate in such a way that you are going to make more money. They got the gold sickness. What can you do about it? This one's a layup, folks. Doesn't matter if you're in a red state, doesn't matter if you're in a blue state. In fact, it's an advantage if your district is cherry red, baby. Contact your representative. Tell them you do not want to hear any talk. No talk at all about cutting Social Security. Tell them it is a poison pill for you. Tell them that if they vote or support in any way the cutting of Social Security, you will not, underline this, will not be voting for them in the primaries, and you certainly will not be voting for them in the general election. Contact link in the description. Let me tell you, A handful of people saying that to a representative will affect how they approach the issue, especially if you live in a red district. Oh my gosh. That's why they're using this language, and they're hoping they can use this language and get away with saying this stuff. They're thinking right now it's 2 years before I'm going to have to run, or rather it's a year before I have to run, 2 years before the election. I can get away with cutting this now and pretending like it was something else. And when things go awry with this, I can blame it on Democrats somehow. I'll wait for them to say one thing. I'll wait for them to do one minor change to the bill, such as renaming it slightly. And then I will blame everything on them. Everything that goes wrong, I'll say was their fault. They are not going to try this nonsense if you contact them and say, I see what you're doing. I don't like it. Right now, a handful of people in the United States can change the politics the country is talking about, can change the outcome of this. You can affect the upcoming debt ceiling fight massively. If they stop trying to make cuts to Social Security part of their negotiation that they shouldn't even be having in the first place, well, that's another topic of conversation, part of their fight on the debt ceiling becomes a lot easier. Contact your representative. Tell them you do not want to hear them in any way attacking Social Security. Well, this has been a wonderful get-together with you all today. Lord knows I love me a 2 for Tuesday. I love getting up here and doing 2 live streams. And today, our second live stream will be at 9 p.m. when we look at the State of the Union. It's going to be a good old-fashioned Let's Watch. It'll be you and your old pal Jake watching President Biden talking about the State of the Union. And I cannot wait to hear how he addresses the upcoming debt ceiling fight. It's going to be a fun one, folks. I hope I'll see you there. And I certainly hope if you enjoyed the show today, I'm trying to build this channel. I would love a like. I would certainly love a subscribe so we can see more of each other. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. I'll see you soon.
I've been up since like 3 a.m. I don't hear the hate, what y'all say ain't in. All I know is go, all I know is grind. I'm on your head, all I know is climb, just know I'm different. If I see the target, just know I'm gon' hit it. I don't know the fake, just know I live it. Anything I say, just know I'm in it. I know the ops and they lightweight. I'm in the zone and I might stay. Yeah, I'm on in the right way. Check the scoreboard, look who I play. They say sky the limit, that's too low for us. We showing up in the nosebleeds of the galaxy. When you think of great, look, it's actually me. Yeah, it's actually me. Might just pull up on some nonsense. Ain't no limits on my conscience. I don't know, you don't know, we don't know. Stop us. I don't think nothing can stop us. Ain't none of y'all about to stop us. Might just pull up on some nonsense. Ain't no